Our gospel reading for this morning comes from the 13th chapter of John's gospel. This is part of a quite lengthy section where Jesus is with his disciples on the day of his arrest. Prior to this, he's already washed their feet and he has announced his betrayal, and Judas has left, even though the rest of the disciples don't seem to understand what is going on. And now Jesus continues talking with his disciples. When he had gone out, that is Judas, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I have said to the Jews, so I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The word of the Lord. Thank you, God. Unless you've been on a desert island for the last few months, it's hard to imagine that you could not know about the uproar in the Roman Catholic Church over abusive pedophile priests. Now, I have no interest in getting into the debate over how well the Pope is handling the situation. But nonetheless, it seems obvious that at times the church hierarchy has turned a blind eye to abuse, exposing the most vulnerable to terrible crimes, and apparently simply to protect the reputation of the church and the priesthood. Of course, that's not what it did. It had exactly the opposite effect. It has sullied and tarnished the reputation of the church, and worse, it has sullied and tarnished the faith, and therefore the faith's namesake, Jesus. How could it not? People who follow Jesus allow children to be abused. What are non-Christians to think about the faith when they see that? But sullying the faith is hardly restricted to Roman Catholics. We Presbyterians may not be as prone to the particular abuses that occurred in the Catholic Church, but in the past we have moved around male pastors who preyed on vulnerable women in their congregation. And when we fight in the church, we often fight dirty. In our recent battles in the Presbyterian Church over whether or not members who are gay and lesbian can be elders and pastors and deacons, we have engaged in partisan nastiness that is normally reserved for politics. And if you ask someone who's not a church person what they know about Presbyterians, it's not uncommon to hear, aren't they those folks that are always fighting over gays? Jesus said, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Jesus says that one of our most powerful witnesses is when we embody his love, when we love each other as he loved us. This is how people will understand what Jesus, what the faith is all about. And so what sort of witness are they getting? Far too often it is church institutions that seem to be primarily concerned with their own survival, with self-preservation. And it is denominations and congregations that fight over everything from who to ordain, to what songs to sing, to what color the carpet should be. By this, everyone will know that we are Jesus' disciples. But it's not that church fights and church failings are our only witness. There are countless acts of love and kindness that go on in this congregation all the time. Some of our members regularly visit those who are sick in the hospital, who are confined to home or to a care facility. And many people have told me how much love and care they received from other members when they were going through some terrible difficulty, be it an illness, a loss of a job, the death of a loved one. And beyond this congregation, other congregations and denominations continue to work in the rebuilding effort in the aftermath of Katrina and other natural disasters, often long after the novelty has worn off for the general public. As Nicholas Kristof wrote in a New York Times editorial just the other day, there is a church beyond the headlines of abuse and fights. But before we get all smug about how good we regular, everyday Christians are at loving one another, we may do well to remember just what Jesus means when he says to love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. Jesus defines our love for one another by his love for us. And Jesus' love gives itself totally and completely. It risks ridicule and abuse. It is even willing to die for us. Now, one of the more hopeful signs I see in mainline church these days is a move in the church away from faith as believing the right things and towards faith as a deepening spirituality that is nurtured by particular practices and behaviors. And I think this move opens the door to a much more substantial faith because it is inherently more relational. Love is not about belief, it is about relationship. And in Jesus, we encounter God's passionate love for us. You know, imagining God or Jesus as a passionate lover is an ancient part of the Christian tradition. But many modern Protestants have done away with such notions in favor of theologies rooted in rational understandings about the nature of God and of Jesus. But all we can do with a rational notion, a rational concept, is to agree with it or disagree with it. But the love given by a lover, that's altogether different. When someone loves another deeply and passionately, it is amazing the things that she will do for the one she loves. She will put aside her own wants and needs and desires for the sake of the other. She will sacrifice for the sake of the other. She will forgive horrible pains and hurts inflicted on her by the other. But none of that will really matter if that other has never fallen in love with her. Jesus has loved us deeply and passionately. Jesus has put aside his own needs and desires for our sake. Jesus has sacrificed for us. Jesus is even willing to forgive the pain of the cross out of love. But none of that really matters if we do not fall passionately and deeply in love with Jesus. And when we do, Jesus says, that will show up in how we deeply and passionately love one another.